plenty of blustery showers, though, moving through, particularly around western coasts. And these may linger on for a time, bringing longer spells of rain at times too, particularly across parts of the south. Further inland, across central and southeastern areas, we're likely to see plenty of clearer skies, so a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach tomorrow morning. So through around Scotland, we are still going to continue to see plenty of showers, mainly around coasts, though a few feeding inland at times too. Under clearer skies, though, it is going to be feeling chilly with a risk of frost. Still plenty of showers around coasts of Northern Ireland, northwest England too. Drier and clearer further east. And generally across parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a much clearer start to the day. Once again, a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach the morning. But overall on Tuesday, it is set to be a much brighter day. Still can't rule out some showers, mainly around northwestern coasts, perhaps just feeding inland and across northern parts of England at times. But overall a brighter day, plenty of sunshine, and with much lighter winds, it's likely to feel much more pleasant compared to this afternoon. That's away from northeastern coast of Scotland though, still some blustery winds here and still plenty of showers moving through. Now heading into Wednesday, we'll see a bit of a split in the weather. Outbreaks of rain across the south, some blustery winds. This rain could linger for a time across central and parts of southeast England. But to the north of this, plenty of clear skies, plenty of sunny spells, still just a few showers around coastal areas. And to finish off the week, likely to see some foggy and frosty mornings, but still plenty of sunshine by day. Bye for now.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, COP29 has drawn to a close with a £300 billion annual climate reparations package agreed. We must repudiate it and a future government should pull out of the Paris Accords. The former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Lord Hogan Howe, has blasted his old force for its Orwellian pursuit of non-crime hate incidents. But will it stop this authoritarian policy? The Labour government is facing a crisis of confidence as businesses prepare to slash hiring after Red Rachel's tax raid. Plus, as the assisted dying bill is to be voted on later this week, I'll be talking to someone who recovered from a life-threatening illness who thinks this legislation might have killed her. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most forthright column panel, Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Joseph Casper.
Good evening, it's 8:01. I'm Joe Casper in the GB newsroom. It's been reported 2 British tourists are missing after a tourist boat sunk in the Red Sea off Egypt. The Foreign Office says it is supporting several British nationals and their families. 2 Brits are among the 28 rescued. The governor of the Red Sea region said the yacht was carrying 44 people and a high sea wave hit the vessel, causing it to capsize in about 5 or 7 minutes. Rescue efforts are ongoing, led by the military and local officials. The Environment Secretary says more flooding is likely this week following the devastation already caused by Storm Bert, which has claimed 5 lives. The storm, which swept across England and Wales over the weekend, brought torrential rain, flooding and 80-mile-per-hour winds. In Northamptonshire, a major incident has been declared as heavy rainfall caused severe flooding, overwhelming local emergency services with more than 800 calls. Authorities there are urging the public to only dial 999 when there is a risk to life. 12 British soldiers have been injured in a major crash in Estonia involving 2 minibuses transporting NATO troops. 8 of those, most seriously injured, were airlifted to the UK, with 3 still in hospital. The crash on Friday involved 6 vehicles near the Russian border. The soldiers serving on NATO's Operation Cabrit were on their way back from their base in Tapa. An RAF jet was deployed to evacuate them, transferring them to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham. In the US, prosecutors have moved to drop their criminal case against Donald Trump. Special counsel Jack Smith dropped all 4 felony charges against the president-elect related to his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Mr. Trump, who was indicted in August 2023, faced charges including conspiracy to defraud the US and obstruction of an official proceeding. And Chancellor Rachel Rees has defended her budget, telling business leaders it's brought stability to the economy. Speaking at the CBI conference, she said difficult decisions were needed to draw a line under the inheritance from the previous government. Rees ruled out further borrowing or tax hikes, saying public services must now live within their means. She also dismissed calls for big tax rises on businesses, saying the economy is now on firm footing.
We have now drawn a line under the inheritance that I faced. Public finances are now on a firm footing, and also our public services are funded in a proper way. And we've now set the envelope for those public services for the rest of this Parliament, which means we're not going to have to come back for more.
Those are your latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Joe Casper. More in an hour. Now, back to State of the Nation.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. It was 3 years ago, almost to the day, when COP26 in Glasgow came to a close. The final deal, which ran into overtime, culminated in a 5 minutes to midnight change from India and China, a change apparently so disastrous that it struck shame in the hearts of the nation, sent shockwaves throughout the developing world, It even made the chairman of COP, Alok Sharma, cry. But what was this dramatic change? A non-legally binding agreement to phase out the global use of coal, a cheap and plentiful fuel, was modified to phase down. Well, 3 years later, we have the same histrionics echoing from Baku. Developing nations stormed out of talks which ran into 30 hours of overtime. Didn't even think they paid for it. But this time, developed nations, that means you, the UK taxpayers, have promised £300 billion a year in climate reparations to developing nations, which apparently isn't enough. You may remember when the Prime Minister said this.
What we're not going to do is start telling people how to live their lives. We're not going to start dictating to people what they do. It is an ambitious target, it's a realisable target, but it's not going to be one in which we tell people how to live their lives.
Well, I'm afraid not the first time the Reverend Starmer may not have been entirely accurate about this. The Labour chairman of the Energy Committee, Bill Esterton, in a cat-out-of-the-bag moment, has said people will absolutely have to change their lifestyles to reach Labour's targets. Indeed, Labour's new carbon targets are based on Climate Change Committee projections, which assume a halving of meat and dairy consumption. The chairman of the Climate Change Committee, who said people will have to switch to electric cars and heat pumps to reach these targets too. And it's these lifestyle-changing policies, like the petrol-diesel ban and the boiler ban, that is causing huge problems for consumers and manufacturers alike. Visit Port Talbot if you don't believe me. It's time to accept that we live in a different time. Donald Trump has been elected and almost certainly withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords. The next Tory party manifesto ought to pledge to do the same. Then we can begin to enable British industry and businesses to be truly competitive again, with cheap energy, no net zero-driven market restrictions and free choices for consumers. No nation has ever achieved anything by making itself voluntarily poorer, which is why it's time to scrap net zero altogether. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm delighted to be joined now by the founder of the climate think tank E3G and friend of the programme, Tom Berg. Tom, thank you for coming back.
Good evening.
Now, are you with Keir Starmer or Bill Esterton on people making lifestyle changes?
Well, first of all, I think you should ask them whether they agree or disagree with each other. But no, I don't have a view. I mean, frankly, politicians, in my experience, are disagreeing with each other all the time, and I'm trying to make sense out of it. But what I'm really interested in is your concern about the fact that we're being told by politicians what to do, because you told us what to do 520 times when you were an MP. That's the number of pieces of legislation you voted on. That's what we have Parliament for, is to tell us what to do.
But there's a balance, isn't there, that you want to allow people to lead their lives as much as possible, freely, and you want people to get richer. I never wanted to vote for things that were going to make people poorer.
No, I absolutely agree with you. There's a balance, and exactly what the thing we have to do is to strike that balance. Now, I'm going to be really interested to see whether people who've just been flooded out of their houses for the second time in 4 years in Pontypridd think where the balance should be drawn, and whether you think the same place is where we should draw it. I think they're very much in favour of staying in the Climate Convention.
I think you're making a leap to assume that this has anything to do with climate change.
No, I'm not making a leap. I'm actually paying attention to what the facts are.
There isn't evidence for that. And
no, I'm sorry, you're quite wrong.
You see that
there's a considerable amount of evidence for that.
Extreme weather incidents are having a lower cost in terms of GDP now than they did in the 1990s.
Sorry.
This is really important because we keep on being told the fantastical stories of what climate change is doing.
It would be really important.
In GDP terms, there is a lower cost of climate events now in 2024 than there was in the 1990s.
Where did you hear that?
That's from the chap we had on the programme, very well-known, Bjorn Munich.
Bjorn Lomborg?
Yeah.
I've been debating Bjorn Lomborg on this stuff. You know what? I'm interested. I've known him for 40 years.
Nice that you've known him.
He's a brilliant cherry picker. He's about the best cherry picker I know.
Figures, aren't
no. Actually, frankly, if they
per capita cost.
Frankly, if the figures come from Bjorn, you should test them with a very strong
pinch of salt. You don't like the figures because of who's put them together. You're not saying the figures are wrong.
No, wait.
But hold on. You're not saying the figures are wrong. You're saying you don't like the source. You accuse him of cherry picking. That's the biggest cherry pick I've ever seen.
Pick. It's an ad hominem argument, to be precise about that. But anyway, it's not a cherry picking.
It's also an ad hominem
All I'm saying is it's a person who I've known and studied for 40 years since he first read the Skeptical Environmentalist.
Are you saying his figures are wrong?
I don't know, and nor do you know. You don't know they're right.
Well, he presents them.
Yeah, you know.
He presents the figures in percent of GDP terms.
So you believe him, but
I
not
believe
me.
that he has taken his figures accurately.
Yeah, well, why do you believe that?
Because but you're not giving figures.
No, about what?
About GDP per capita cost.
Let me give you a figure, because you're choosing a figure. Let me give you a figure against that 300 billion that you said. The cost over the last 2 years, this is, by the way, from the International Chamber of Commerce, so it's not some bunch of green freaks that come up with this number, £451 billion, the cost of extreme weather events. That's the International Chamber of Commerce.
We've had extreme weather events throughout history.
Hang on, you haven't let me finish my point.
But this is why the relative point is so fundamental. Because
only if it's correct.
We've always had extreme weather events.
That's absolutely true. Of course that's right. But what we haven't had is extreme weather events at the kind of frequency
the point Bjorn Lomborg makes is really easy to check, because we know the cost.
But you haven't checked it.
We know, I haven't personally gone through the figures.
Nor have I.
But the GDP is known, the cost is known. There's no reason to think that his figure would be inaccurate. It's a very easy figure to put together.
You think lots of people whose facts you disagree with are inaccurate. You do that all the time.
But you're just disputing them on the basis you don't agree with
one that you've chosen the fact that suits your case.
I do sometimes go through figures and find that they're wrong, and then, of course, reveal that.
Of course you would.
But you haven't done that. You're just saying they're wrong because you don't like Bjorn's figures.
I'm saying I don't...
That's not a proper approach. It's unlike you, actually.
No, actually, I'm not doing that. I'm telling you, I don't know whether they're right. I have good reason.
So you're saying instead that you think that it's much worse. And this is the climate alarmism that we get. It's saying
you're making an ad hominem argument. You're calling me an alarmist.
I am, yes.
And you're not.
But every time we get a drop of rain, everyone says that's climate change.
We're not just getting a drop of rain, dear. The reason this is such an interesting subject tonight is because there are people who are now experiencing extreme weather events, whose future insurance bills will go up because the likelihood of these events increasing in frequency is being driven by climate change, and the insurance companies know that.
But this is where
that's why their bills will go up.
This is where you make the great leap. Because you've just said these floods were caused by climate change, and now you're saying that they will be caused. So you've moved from the present to the future. Sort of seamlessly.
Jacob, I know you understand probability as well as I do. I didn't use the word cause. I simply said we know on the basis of attribution science that the probability is increased. That's exactly what insurance companies do.
Yes, but from an insurance company's point of view, if it is relative to GDP lower than it was in the past, insurance premiums will decline because insurance companies work on a cost proportionate to their income reviews. So actually, insurance premiums should be lower now than they were in the 1990s as a proportion of GDP.
No, and if the climate is getting worse because climate policy is failing, then insurance policy prices will go up. But no, are they going up or are they going down? Is household insurance cheaper now than it was before?
Relative to incomes.
Well, I don't know what relative to incomes has got. I mean, there are poor people who pay and rich people who pay. And relative... No, it doesn't matter. Because
of course it does.
If you're a rich person, the increase doesn't matter very much. If you're a poor person, it matters a lot.
If you insure a house worth £100,000, it costs less than a house worth £1 million. It is always relative to what you are insuring and the affordability of insurance. If you've got a £10,000 car, it costs less to insure than if you've got...
of course that's true.
So of course it's relative.
Well, what's relative? What's that got to do with GDP?
The issue of insurance. You were saying insurance was going up.
All I'm saying is...
The question is insurance going up
relatively? The frequency of extreme weather events... Relative to what?
But you're making a great...
I'm not making a point about relativities. I'm just simply saying, very simply, if the frequency of extreme weather events goes up,
the cost of them has gone down.
The frequency,
the cost.
Well, you just changed the subject.
No, I started about cost from the very beginning.
I'm not talking about cost.
I was always talking about
cost. I'm talking about frequency.
Well, we have frequency has varied throughout the centuries.
The frequency has gone up systematically. The frequency of extreme weather events. I haven't talked about hurricanes. You're talking about hurricanes.
Hurricane is an extreme weather event.
It's one of many. It's one of many.
But you're just making broad brush statements saying these things are happening.
No, dear, I'm holding you.
What specific extreme weather events have become more frequent? Hurricanes are less frequent, as we know.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what. Floods in Pontypridd. floods in Pontypridd. One in a 100-year flood has happened twice in the last 4 years.
Well, one flood in one place, twice. Come on, that's not serious evidence. No, it's not.
No,
you've got to look at aggregates.
You're quite right, and I could say the same to your evidence. So the point about it is the frequency is increase of extreme weather events of many kinds is increasing. I didn't say what kinds. Droughts and floods and fires, all of them are...
Fires are not. Fires have gone down.
I'm sorry, that's just wrong.
I think there's statistics to that point. We've
show them to me.
Reports on how the number of fires are actually lower than they were.
Show them to me. I don't...
Well, you show them to me. I mean, this is...
Sorry, you're quite right. I'm sorry, if I would very happily produce the figures for you the next time I'm on your show and show you the figures.
We must have you back, because it's always a pleasure to discuss these things with you. Tom, thank you very much. After the break, I will be speaking to an owner of a 12th century castle where GB News Dinosaur Hour, that didn't include me, was filmed, which is under risk from Labour's new tax regime. Plus, will the Metropolitan Police bring an end to its brutal regime of pursuing non-crime hate incidents?
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Apparently, in the Mail, page 5, hard-pressed bosses already having to deal with deadlines, red tape and staff who won't actually come into the office over Christmas. And they're saying that Christmas parties this year are going to be as lame as ever because everyone's afraid of basically getting cancelled or misbehaving or getting sacked for their behaviour. Would you risk it, Trey, at Christmas?
Do you know, I've actually never had a normal job in my life, so I wouldn't last a second because I'm not very politically correct. But it must be horrendous, really, because rather than enjoying yourself, you're having to completely always censor yourself. And it might be the most innocent of stuff that's said to someone that they then take offence to, which means you're going to probably just keep your mouth shut, which doesn't sound like the best of parties, does it, really?
No. Tricky one, isn't it? Because you're not at work, so it's not an office issue if, you know, some banter and it's taken the wrong way. But still, it's still a work environment, isn't it?
Yeah. If HR shows up, it's a work party. It's a work event.
HR shows up, I'm gone.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. And so even for us this year, first of all, it's the first year we're calling it a holiday party. I don't know how I felt about that.
Really? What, your company's doing that?
Yeah, they're calling it a holiday party.
Oh, no, well, no.
Yeah, I know. I voted against.
So they got rid of the word...
Christmas.
Why?
Because we want to be inclusive.
How's it not inclusive to call it Christmas?
I know. Trust me.
Are you still going to go? I wouldn't bother going. I'd say no.
I am going to go, but I'm going to go dressed as Mrs. Claus, and it's going to be Christmassy, and I'm going to make sure that Christmas enters the door with me.
Yeah, you spread that Christian vibe.
100%. But outside of that, there is that element of HR showing up, and HR will be sober, and they've already prepped them to say, like, listen, this isn't your party. HR can have their party. This is your hangout.
Yeah.
Make sure everyone's being PC.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about COP29 and the mail mogs have come in. Mike says the change toward net zero in the UK is already costing everyone a fortune. It is not the time now to be handing out billions to other countries, particularly as we have very low producers of carbon. Parliament is not there to tell us what to do. It is there to do what the people want. And Sandra says, and fanatical net zero plans should be scrapped. Historical evidence proves climate has always changed. This government is happy to make us all poorer, including pensioners struggling to eat and heat, while they squander our taxes on net zero that will not save the planet. And Leslie says, no, I had the answer. Yes, very good point. The former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Lord Hogan Howe, has issued a stark warning to his old force, pushing it to look closely at the Policy Exchange report documenting the extent of the non-crime hate incident regime. Following Essex Police's pursuit of Alison Pearson for a now-deleted tweet, the report has claimed that non-crime hate incidents, a phenomenon that has no basis in legislation, consumes 60,000 hours of police time annually. Well, I'm joined now by my most forthright panel, the Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Amy, wouldn't you think that 60,000 hours were better spent catching rapists? That Essex Police, who went round to Alison Pearson, get, I think, 3% of rapists a year.
Well, I don't think it should be an either-or. The reason that these non-crime hate incidences exist is because hate crimes were going underreported, and therefore hate incidences are more serious.
But these aren't crimes, that's the point.
I know they're not crimes, but the police deal with things that aren't crimes all the time. Missing persons, for example, mental health incidences, antisocial behaviour orders. Remember ASBOs? They were famously not very effective, but it's still the same principle. So the principle is you collect data, you measure trends, and then you can analyse and prevent crimes from happening, prevent the more serious crimes from happening.
Prevents crimes.
No, actually, I would agree with you. I would say these aren't... If we go to police forces and we say, look, are these things working? Are they working? Because I can talk to you all day long about the intentions behind them, the good intentions behind them, but it does seem that they're not really serving their purpose. But I think what gets lost in this conversation is why they're actually happening. So we can say, oh, it's a police state, Starmer's gone mad. It's not that. It's not that. It's not that anyone wants to police thoughts or anything like that. It's just a way that it was thought we could prevent hate crime, which is something we should take very seriously. And the fact that they were underreported is a cause for concern.
Isn't that something that's gone wrong with policing? That really the Essex Police should have applied more common sense, should be using its limited resources better, and that the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner Essex don't come out of this at all well.
I agree with you, Jacob, but one mustn't assume people are capable of applying common sense. Plus, the law doesn't really understand common sense. Whenever you have anything to do with the law, if the law says something is permissible or you might wish to do something, that automatically draws people like a magnet towards doing that thing. So once you create this thing, which if you think about philosophically is a nonsense, the police investigating something that by definition isn't a crime, because it's a non-crime hate incident, the moment you say you ought to be investigating this, the police then feel obliged to do it. And then that creates a momentum which is very hard to resist. So to say the police ought to exert common sense, you're asking the police essentially to ignore orders. No, the orders need to change. That's the problem. Now, of course, all this started with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. It started with a good intention, which was the police recognised that because some police forces were not taking race hate seriously enough, they might be misunderstanding crime or investigating it in the wrong way. So it starts with a good intention. But fundamentally, the moment it becomes institutionalised, the moment its definition expands, the moment, as I say, you make it something that police are encouraged to log and investigate, they're going to do it. And every minute that they spend doing that, they're not investigating burglary, murder or rape.
But it is true that there are certain behaviours and certain things that precede crime, typically. So if you can identify those and you can establish some data, then you can prevent crimes. And surely that is...
They recorded a non-crime hate incident for a 9-year-old calling a fellow 9-year-old in the playground a retard. I mean, for heaven's sake, that's not going to lead to a life...
Because if a teacher didn't report that, whoever that came from, I don't know if it came from a teacher, the student or a parent, but if someone didn't report that, they are then liable for the fact that they've not reported it. That's my point. The moment you say you should be looking for these things, you actually create an obligation to look for it, and that's why it spirals out of control.
I think it's dangerous to cherry-pick certain incidences because we don't really know the full context of those or any of the other supposedly ludicrous incidences that a lot of the newspapers have been delighting in and regaling us with. But it is true. So say this argument could also be applied to misogyny being recorded as a hate crime, something that doesn't currently happen, because patterns emerge. If you collect data, then you can see what precludes a crime, and therefore you can prevent the crimes more easily. So maybe these are being poorly executed, but the principle, the heart of it, they're not useless.
Now, for those of you who weren't listening carefully a moment ago, when I said retard, I was quoting a 9-year-old who'd used this word. It was not a word I was using myself.
No.
So anyone from Ofcom who wasn't paying attention,
I understand.
I'm just clarifying. I thought you would have done, and I'm sure Amy would have done.
We're going
too.
to exercise our common sense and understand exactly what you mean.
What I meant, and Essex Police also said that it wasn't a non-crime hate incident they were investigating, but as they then prosecute her, it can't have been a crime.
Right.
So I'm very puzzled by Essex Police's defence of its position.
Ultimately, if you've said or done something which meets the threshold of criminality, it should be investigated. Anything else, horrible though it might be, is ultimately something which is dealt with through social sanction. It's dealt with through the disapproval of others. It's dealt with through education. It's dealt with through prevention by making it clear that such thought is not tolerated by polite society. But by definition, I come back to, if what you have said is not criminal, it is not the matter of the police.
Indeed. But it is the matter of the police to try and
prevent crime, but not to invent crime.
And to protect the public.
Anyway, not content with hammering employers, farmers, GPs, social care providers and the hospitality sector, Labour has now turned its sights on our nation's stately homes and castles. The Chancellor's budget raid on the estates of this nation threatens to reduce these priceless jewels of our history and culture to mere cash cows for the Treasury. This leftist government, driven by class envy, has no interest in protecting the nation's heritage. Well, I'm joined now by Jason Lindsay, President of Historic Houses and the owner of Hedingham Castle, which is where GBNews filmed Dinosaur Hour. And as I said before, I wasn't in Dinosaur Hour, I can't think why, to discuss the impact of these punitive policies. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I'm very grateful. What is your experience of maintaining an amazing piece of British heritage in terms of Hedingham Castle? And how do you think it will be affected by budget changes?
The Hedingham Castle has been around for 1,000 years, and we've had plagues, we've had wars, we've had all kinds of issues. We've had punitive taxation in the early 20th century. We're now faced with another tax against the background of massive decline in revenues since COVID recovery. Hospitality has been hit incredibly hard. We've got the combined BPR and APR issues coming in. And the previous Labour government and Conservative has completely understood what we've done over the years to try and make these places work. We're community hubs. We are amazing centres of the local economies. We're a driver of wonderful sort of economies that spread out to the countryside. And there seems to be a little appreciation of that. And we're going to lose our built heritage. It'll take a long time to happen because the taxation happens at death. But we've got to try and inform the government of the benefits that we do, because what we have in this country is world class, and we've got to celebrate it, not tax it out of existence.
And with business property relief, what benefit would you have got prior to the changes?
Well, basically, if you're running a business like Hedingham Castle, we're open to the public. We have 25,000 visitors. We have a lot of weddings. We've worked full steam to make this place work. If you are a business, you can basically every 10 years, because we're in a type of trust, we have a tax chargeable on the value of the trust, and we set that up, all sanctioned by the government, and basically you get a business property relief on a percentage of the business.
And this would be the same for any business, wouldn't it? It would be the same if you were in a retail business or you were a construction business. All businesses have business property relief, and if they're in trust, they don't suffer the 10-year charge, and on death, they don't suffer death duties. So it's not just historic assets that are being hit, it's all businesses.
Yes, I mean, my representation as president of Historic Houses, there's 1,400 houses that we have with our 22 million visitors annually. And I'm deeply distressed for the farmers, I'm deeply distressed for the businesses, the family businesses that want to carry on and they want to invest. To say that you've got to hand over 20% every time there's a death, I completely understand the government got to raise some funds, but the damage they're going to do to our built heritage is exponential. And I really genuinely hope they don't understand that we're going to be caught up in that, because the tourism will drop off, places won't remain open to the public, they'll become private hotels or private houses, and that enormous benefits the local communities will evaporate.
And the Labour Party would say there was a black hole that they're trying to fill and they've got to get money from somewhere. Do you think that is a reasonable argument to be making?
I do think it's a reasonable argument. I completely understand things are broken, but by chucking money at things is not necessarily the way forward to fix things. efficient management and spending the money correctly. The Conservatives didn't manage to do it, and I doubt the Labour will either. But previous Labour governments have understood what we're doing as private owners of the heritage. You can't put all these amazing places like Hedingham Castle into national ownership because they can't afford it. The National Trust doesn't want them. The local councils don't want them. If they want us to protect them, they've got to give us a fiscal environment that is satisfactory and fair. And then we'll carry on opening to the public, sharing our places and celebrating what they are.
And with a Grade 1 listed building, you have a huge cost of maintaining it.
It's millions of pounds over the years that we've spent out of business that we've been allowed to generate from the revenue that comes in from the tourism and the weddings. So they're saying, oh, well, inherited wealth is a bad thing. But inherited wealth allows us to maintain these places and share them with the public. And if there's some kind of, like natural capital was introduced recently, if we have a kind of heritage capital that can have some kind of exemption that allows us to go forward and plan these things. As owners, we're just custodians. We don't feel as owners. You inherit somewhere and you want to keep it going for the future. It's not about feeling like you own Hedingham Castle. It's over 1,000 years old. It's never belonged really to one family. We're just doing this. Nowadays, they're shared with, as I said, 22 million visitors. There's huge well-being. There's huge benefits. There's huge economic spin-off. And I would hope that the current Labour Chancellor has an understanding and we can talk to her and work out a way forwards. Everybody else is going to be bleeding. And I'm not saying this is a hard luck story, but we've got to get that message over, Jacob.
Well, I wish you every success, and thank you very much, Jason, for joining me this evening. In a moment, we'll be looking at the confidence crisis the Labour government is facing as 2/3 of businesses are set to slash hiring plans.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a blustery day, we are going to see winds ease into this evening, leaving a mix of clear spells and showers tonight, and it is going to be turning rather chilly under those clearer skies too. Storm Bert, currently sat to the northeast of the UK, will eventually move its way over to Scandinavia. It does leave behind some blustery winds and some outbreaks of rain for a time, though these will eventually ease away overnight. Still plenty of blustery showers though moving through, particularly around western coasts, and these may linger on for a time, bringing longer spells of rain at times too, particularly across parts of the south. Further inland across central and southeastern areas, we're likely to see plenty of clearer skies, so a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach tomorrow morning. So through around Scotland, we are still going to continue to see plenty of showers, mainly around coasts, though a few feeding inland at times too. Under clearer skies, though, it is going to be feeling chilly with a risk of frost. Still plenty of showers around coasts of Northern Ireland, northwest England too. Drier and clearer further east, and generally across parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a much clearer start to the day. Once again, a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach the morning. But overall on Tuesday, it is set to be a much brighter day. Still can't rule out some showers, mainly around northwestern coasts, perhaps just feeding inland and across northern parts of England at times. But overall a brighter day, plenty of sunshine, and with much lighter winds, it's likely to feel much more pleasant compared to this afternoon. That's away from northeastern coasts of Scotland though, still some blustery winds here and still plenty of showers moving through. Now heading into Wednesday, we'll see a bit of a split in the weather. Outbreaks of rain across the south, some blustery winds. This rain could linger for a time across central and parts of southeast England. But to the north of this, plenty of clear skies, plenty of sunny spells, still just a few showers around coastal areas. And to finish off the week, likely to see some foggy and frosty mornings, but still plenty of sunshine by day. Bye for now.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We were discussing non-crime hate incidents and our heritage. And Nicholas says in a mail mog, in men whom men pronounce as ill, I find so much goodness still. In men whom men pronounce divine, I find so much of sin and blot. I dare not draw a line between the two where God has not. Who decides they are good enough to define bad? It's a very good question. And Walter says, this government is determined to strip away as much of our history as they can, as quickly as they can. It really seems like they hate this country and its past. I just don't understand why. The fallout from Rachel Reeves' Red Rachel's £40 billion tax raid on British businesses continues. According to a poll by the Confederation of British Industry, nearly two-thirds of employers now plan to cut hiring, while almost half are considering layoffs. Firms are also delaying pay rises, slashing investment, and in some cases, fearing for their survival. This poll comes at the same time as McVitie's has warned businesses are losing the taste for investing in businesses, implying Red Rachel takes the biscuit. Growth down, debt up, investment slashed, pay stalled, bond markets anxious. This is the cost of socialist ideology over pragmatism. Well, I'm joined now by my panel, Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Tim, this budget's unravelling, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, its goals conflict with each other. It officially wants growth. So it wants to say you've got to get out and work. But at the same time, it's making it more expensive for employers. And it's also about to introduce employment legislation which will make it harder for them to hire people and hold on to them. So it's contradictory. And I think the fundamental problem is it's motivated entirely by a desire to find some money from somewhere. And like all good socialists, they've looked around at wherever the money is and they've said, well, we'll take that because there is some. What they don't realise is that the state of nature is there is no tax. People base their economic life and their own life around the assumption that they will not be raided for what they do. And when governments suddenly intervene and start saying things like farms inheritance tax, that turns everything upside down because now your business becomes a liability. If you start taxing people for employment, that turns things upside down because now it becomes expensive to hire people. So what do businesses do? They hire less people, they sell things off, they don't continue with the family business. And in the long run, that means growth is down, tax income is down, which means the government, although Rachel Reeves today said that her budget was the last harsh budget she'll pursue, there will be more because the income will be less. So budgets will just get harder and harder as the years go by.
That's right, isn't it? That tax will have to go up further because there won't be any economic growth.
I think when you have these conversations and you say words like raid, it sounds very dramatic, but really think about what we need the money for. So public services have been pushed into the ground and we need to have a functioning NHS because otherwise what we're going to do, we're going to have an entirely poorly workforce because the workforce depends, as does everyone in society, on having functioning public services. So yes, they did have to find the money from somewhere, and this seems like a reasonable place to find the money. Some of the companies that have said they're going to halt hiring are companies like Tesco, M&S, Boots. Tesco made £2.3 billion in profit last year. I think they could probably find some change in the sofa to pay their staff and continue hiring
because
despite this small tax increase.
It's a big tax increase because it is a tax increase on every single one of their employees, not just the 2% increase, but also the lowering of the threshold, which means every employee costs significantly more.
But the lowering of the threshold actually benefits smaller business, does it not?
It doesn't,
because now it means that you can employ 4 people before the NI kicks in. It's something about the way the new £5,000 to £10,000 thing works. So 50% of businesses...
Only if you're paying them the minimum wage.
50% of businesses are small businesses.
But only if you're paying them the minimum wage.
They're going to be largely unaffected. So really it's these big profit-making machines that I think can pick up the bill.
No, but it whacks you as soon as you employ your 5th person. So the businesses that are growing, do you want all your businesses to stay at 4 people?
I don't know about the word whack. I don't think
it does whack. It does. It is an absolute whack.
I know it's trying to be portrayed as a big thwack.
It's not a whack. It's a series of little cuts, which eventually all add up to the blood just draining away from the economy.
I'd rather have the blood drain away there than in the NHS, which is where it was draining away before. We need to have functioning public services. So, yes, they need to make tough choices because they've been left with such a terrible state of the economy.
But there's no evidence this will improve public services.
Yeah. Of course there is.
No, there isn't. Just spending more money has not made the NHS better. There are records amounts spent on the NHS, and it hasn't got better.
Certainly settled
budget sets signals for future actions. Who is wealthy is going to want to move to this country. Their education's going to get taxed, the land's going to get taxed. Who is going to want to set up a business in this country because they're waiting to find out what the employment law changes are going to be, and then they worry the taxes go up even further in the future. This is the problem. I think past Labour governments, they made these mistakes, they learned from them. Do you know who saved the stately home in this country? Dennis Healey. Because when he became Chancellor, his first plan was to introduce a wealth tax that would have hit stately homes. But there was so much protest that he scrapped the wealth tax, but he saved the planned exemption, or the planned loophole, which was that you could avoid tax if you open your house for a certain number of days a year. He worked out that gutting the countryside and destroying stately homes was not good for the economy or for society. But unfortunately, it takes governments making mistakes, introducing bad policy, to realise the consequences, and then over time to roll it back.
We can move on to another. Yeah, but hold on, because we can move on to another issue of taxpayer-funded mismanagement, potentially even indoctrination, which has emerged. Osborne's Lift the Flap, question and answers about refugees. Must buy at all good bookshops. Encourages children to lobby MPs declaring refugees enrich our country. These books are being stocked by local council libraries, and free copies have been distributed to schools across the country. But here's the rub. The Refugee Council, which helped produce the book, has received almost £35 million of taxpayers' money in the last 5 years. That's your money funding blatant political indoctrination. Back to my panel. Come on, Amy, you're going to be all in favour of this. You like a bit of indoctrination, don't you?
It's very upsetting to me that you would call this indoctrination. This is education led by experts in the field using sources...
No, it's deeply political.
Using real-life accounts of refugees to influence the writing. The illustrations were done by a Ukrainian refugee. The whole book is based on real-life stories.
This is
and
indoctrination
evidence,
to try and encourage mass migration.
or to try and encourage empathy and compassion, like little things like that might be good for kids.
Yeah, and it's not hard to get that from a child either. I don't disagree with the moral message of the book, which is people who are being persecuted need somewhere to go, and we should welcome them. And what can you do, children, to help them? I'm fine with that. But we, the adults in the room, who still technically are in charge of the country, know there is a bigger political and economic argument around asylum seekers. And there is something a little bit disturbing about this idea of trying to get to people when they're young, to frame their political worldview, so that when they turn 18 or 16, they'll vote in a certain way.
Accusing books of these grand... it reminds me of what became before Section 28, which was the book. It was called something like Jenny Lives with Eric and John, and it was put in some libraries as an educational resource. And this is very similar. This is not meant to be for everyone to read. This is specifically for people in the situation who need help, to tell their children...
I'm not in favour of banning it. Neither of us has said ban it.
But you're acting
We're asking about the money that goes towards financing the
curriculum. It's just a useful resource made by the
we were
Refugee
short of money and we needed money for the NHS. Now you're saying it could be
There's one thing
squandered.
giving the Refugee Council money. There's another thing them helping the development of this book.
Let's follow this logically. If being in favour of opening one's borders to refugees is a political view, I'm sure you'd agree, should we publicly finance or put into libraries copies of the Conservative or Reform Party manifesto?
Do you know what? I don't actually think
if we're now publicly financing political views
in danger and in need of our help, I don't think that is a particularly political view. I think that's just a human
No, but the nature of the book is, I believe it encourages people to write and things like that, and it talks about the myths that surround refugees,
it
and
invites
etc.
them to have a thoughtful, considered response.
And I'm willing to bet, I will confess I've not read it, but I'm willing to bet that there isn't a chapter dedicated to refugees who've committed terror offences. I bet there isn't a chapter in the book related to that, because how on earth you'd illustrate that, I don't know. However talented this Ukrainian is, I wouldn't want to lift that flap.
Well, you've left Amy speechless. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. I certainly don't think taxpayers' money should be spent on these things. We're taxed too heavily. The money doesn't get spent.
Money.
The Refugee Council got £35 million.
Good for helping refugees, not making that money,
and
but
therefore,
making that book.
If they get taxpayers' money, then one way or another it falls back on poor old taxpayer. Thank you to my panel. After the break, I will be speaking to someone who defied the odds and survived a life-threatening illness, who is now deeply concerned about the assisted dying bill, which is being voted on this week.
This is GB News. Britain's news channel.
As Strictly Come Dancing approaches its iconic Blackpool episode, marking halfway through the competition, visually impaired dancers across the country have spoken out about how groundbreaking the casting of Chris McCausland is, who suffers from, if I hope I'm saying this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa, and they've found him particularly inspiring. We've been talking, Sean, about how the casting of Strictly has been inspiring to so many people, but I imagine there'll be lots of people who are watching this at home finding your story of resilience really inspiring, because you've obviously really been through it. Is dancing something that has sort of, you know, helped keep you going through all of those troubles? And what does it mean to you to see casting like this on a show like Strictly Come Dancing?
Like I say, all the things I went through. So those 9 years when I wasn't dancing, you know, I was still dancing in my head and just banging on to other people. Very much not just people with sight loss. You know, I've been a big advocate for people with social isolation. So many people on their own now, social anxiety, especially since COVID. And I just want people to get out. The stuff that I'm doing and all the stuff Chris is obviously doing, it will inspire others. Again, like I say, just not people just with sight loss. I had so many people come up to me in the early days, guys, and now that say, you know what, Shawnee, I've seen you do it, so I'm just going to do it. But you just got to get over yourself, because if you if you bother to do the maths, you know, because all it is maths and walking. Yeah. You know, that's all it is.
Maths and walking actually sounds quite difficult.
Sean, thank you.
Oh, come on, mate. Can you shout? Can you walk? Crack on.
Sean, you're an inspiration. Thank you, mate, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. You're a star, and so glad.
Just before I go, I'm just going to say this is Kev. Here's Kev.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. On Friday, Parliament will vote on Kim Ledbetter's assisted dying bill, and the cross-party group backing the bill has claimed it believes it has a majority in the House of Commons. As a Catholic, I believe in the sanctity of life, that life's always worth preserving, and my next guest story perhaps embodies that principle. Becky Bruno is a Christian psychotherapist and county councillor and has overcome life-threatening illnesses as a child and adult. She has now said she would be dead if this bill had passed before her illness. Becky, thank you so much for coming in. Just tell me your story.
When I was a young teenager, I had an incident that left me in a coma, paralysed and unable to speak. And I believe that if that bill was passed then, I don't believe I'd be dead. I'd be alive now.
And who would have made that choice?
OK, my parents, I'm absolutely certain, will be against it. I don't believe that they would have said yes, but I'm thinking of other children or other people that are in a situation like that. The bill, in my view, is only ever going to, I say attack, is only ever going to be used on people that are extremely vulnerable.
And you obviously, when you were in a coma, you were very vulnerable.
Absolutely.
How rapidly did you recover?
Probably within, it took some years. There was an issue with my hearing because it was a brain injury. So I did have hearing loss. And it probably took a couple of years. I missed a year of school and I had to do physio and rehab and learn to talk again because I'd lost the capability of speaking.
So possibly I mean, the way the law's framed, it would have been you who has to make the choice. It can't be made by other people. So possibly, as you were recovering, people might have said, well, look, you'll never make a full recovery. And you think it's at that point that you might have felt under pressure to bring your own life to an end.
Well, I know that my parents were actually told that I would be a vegetable for the rest of my life and that they would have to care for me.
So there must have been a lot of pressure that could have been built up. And then since then, you went through rehab, you learned to talk again.
Yes.
You've had an amazingly successful career since. How did that develop? How did you get on to all the things that you've done subsequently?
Oh, goodness me. Well, it's been many incidences in my life, and I have actually been seriously ill as well in between time. And I think it's just determination and not being told that I can't do something. So I will push through.
You taught yourself to speak again after you'd been in a coma, and then you trained yourself as an opera singer.
Well, that was later on in life, actually. But
nonetheless, I mean, having been in a position where you couldn't speak, you came out of this coma, you couldn't speak, and then some years later you taught yourself or you were trained as an opera singer. So you were very determined to make the most of, really, in a way, being brought back to life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing, because your doctors didn't know, did they? So they were saying to your parents that your risk of recovery was, or your chance of recovery was not very strong, and yet you came through. And is that what concerns you, the lack of knowledge that people have, and therefore that people may be making decisions or feel they've got to make decisions too early?
I think the issue with this is that when you're in pain, because we're talking about, people dying, when you're in pain, you do things, you make decisions that you would never make if you were not in pain. 2 years ago, I went through chemo and radiotherapy, and I think only people that have actually gone through that can really explain how absolutely painful beyond belief it is. And I remember saying to my husband once, and I feel terribly guilty for saying this, but I did say to him, let me die. Just let me die, because the pain was so awful. And
so in a way you've been through this twice, once when you were a young teenager, and then again more recently when you were facing your own mortality and were in great pain. Do you think at that stage you would ever have been tempted by assisted dying yourself? Or did you know, but even though you were saying, let me die, you didn't really mean it?
No, and I certainly don't believe in taking your own life. I think this is... However, I am very sympathetic that you're in so much pain that I can absolutely understand that. But
you understand why campaigners are making these arguments because of your own personal experience.
But I have a question for them, is that who exactly are they asking? Because I can tell you 100% of my cancer friends are absolutely against this and very, very worried that they will be, I say, targeted when they're at their worst, that they could actually be, bumped off because they've had such a hard time in the previous week. They can't take any more. But actually, I can say you can come. It's difficult, absolutely, but you can come through this. And if you have the support of your family and your friends and your loved ones, it does make it easier. And the worry here is that they're targeting vulnerable people that could be on their own, in pain.
And you had that support. You had the support of your husband and indeed of your parents when you were younger.
Yeah.
And have managed to battle through twice, which is really very remarkable. And you keep going. How did you get involved in the campaign?
I was asked what was my story, and I think I basically put, at the age of 14, I could have been bumped off. That's my concern. It's not just about the legislation that's going through. It's the addition that they could put through this. Everyone knows what's going on in Canada. Children have been offered this service. The poor have been offered the service. The dying have been offered the service. I find that abhorrent, when the state should actually be looking after the ill, the dying, and the people in pain. We should be looking over, and I think that the government have stepped over the mark here.
And that's broadly what Gordon Brown has said, that he thinks there should be palliative care in place properly before you make this an option, because of the risk to people who are, as you say, in pain and difficulty, and therefore not necessarily making a free choice.
No, exactly.
And would you be against it in all circumstances, even if there were these better care for those who are dying? Or do you think it is always wrong?
It's always wrong, especially when the state is overstepping. The state should not be involved in this. The state is actually there to look after us. And I think this is the stepping over the mark.
We must go to the weather. Thank you very much. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. The weather in Somerset will be lovely.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. After a blustery day, we are going to see winds ease into this evening, leaving a mix of clear spells and showers tonight, and it is going to be turning rather chilly under those clearer skies too. Storm Bert, currently sat to the northeast of the UK, will eventually move its way over to Scandinavia. It does leave behind some blustery winds and some outbreaks of rain for a time, though these will eventually ease away overnight. Still plenty of blustery showers though moving through, particularly around western coasts, and these may linger on for a time, bringing longer spells of rain at times too, particularly across parts of the south. Further inland across central and southeastern areas, we're likely to see plenty of clearer skies, so a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach tomorrow morning. So through around Scotland, we are still going to continue to see plenty of showers, mainly around coasts, though a few feeding inland at times too. Under clearer skies, though, it is going to be feeling chilly with a risk of frost. Still plenty of showers around coasts of Northern Ireland, northwest England too. Drier and clearer further east, and generally across parts of England and Wales, it is going to be a much clearer start to the day. Once again, a risk of frost, perhaps even some fog patches by the time we reach the morning. But overall on Tuesday, it is set to be a much brighter day. Still can't rule out some showers, mainly around northwestern coasts, perhaps just feeding inland and across northern parts of England at times. But overall a brighter day, plenty of sunshine, and with much lighter winds, it's likely to feel much more pleasant compared to this afternoon. That's away from northeastern coasts of Scotland though, still some blustery winds here and still plenty of showers moving through. Now heading into Wednesday, we'll see a bit of a split in the weather. Outbreaks of rain across the south, some blustery winds. This rain could linger for a time across central and parts of southeast England. But to the north of this, plenty of clear skies, plenty of sunny spells, still just a few showers around coastal areas. And to finish off the week, likely to see some foggy and frosty mornings, but still plenty of sunshine by day. Bye for now.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues